VC Wisdom Podcast with Diego Torres Palma. He is founder at Ventana Venture. So he's into VC, real estate development, and so forth. He also has his podcast and stands on various boards. So really glad to have you on, Diego, today. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about your companies?
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother. I really appreciate being here. Real estate development firm called Ventana Ventures. Ventana, obviously in Spanish, means window, and so we try to give different windows of opportunity to ourselves and to our investor group. The real estate development company started, interestingly enough, where when I came to Los Angeles, I saw most people buy a building and then they put it for lease, and so they really relegate the wealth creation to a broker. And I just thought, well, why does that work that way? I looked at it like a math problem. And so instead of looking at it that way, I said, why don't we work hard to find amazing operators and tenants first, and then we buy a building in a place where they want to be versus where we want to put them. And that was the hypothesis of the company. And sure enough, we've been able to be successful doing that. And then on the podcast, we interview, similar to what you do, we interview founders all the time. And so sometimes we're lucky enough to invest with them if the timing is right. And, they just happen to be raising. And so, yeah, that's it. Real estate, investing, podcast. That's how it all sort of comes together.
Tell us about the building of Diego, though, your story, how you got there.
Yeah. So for me, the story is I was born in Peru, and my family was in politics, and at the time there was a lot of sort of like a civil unrest period, and so my father ended up being assassinated, which moved our whole family to America. And in doing that, growing up in America as a kid, this is like before the internet, and so it's not like people understood what Peru was or even Machu Picchu or any of that. It was really before people understood, or kids understood you could even like take a plane to a foreign place. And moving to America, it's like no one looked like me really. The part of Massachusetts I was in, it was like no one successful was in the NBA or the NFL or like was a Warren Buffett type. And so it was really weird for me where I was trying to find people that had done it before that looked like me. And just as a kid, like a normal kid curiosity, and they just didn't exist. And so I became obsessed with sort of figuring out the game, I guess, of like capitalism in America. Because if no one's going to teach it to me, then I have to teach it to myself. And I just became obsessed reading, books by Warren Buffett and a bunch of other very nonfiction related books. And yeah, I think the problem I was just trying to solve was how do I make it so that if I have kids one day, or if my sister has two boys right now, and so for my nephews, how do I solve that problem for me so I can impart that on them? And that, I think, that became my life's work. Was just trying to figure out capitalism.
Capitalism. And you like going out of Peru, your family being in politics, like I guess like ambition sort of runs in your vein.
It's funny, I think the older I get, the more I certainly understand that. And I think when I think about real estate development, I mean, just the other day I was in a meeting, and you have all these. For the one thing we do that's very different than most developers is we really go into the community and we really try to hold public forum events, because I'm trying to get dialogue. The last thing I want to do is spend all this money to force something into a community that they might not like at all. And so we really keep it like an open dialogue so that there's some sort of, um, we can always move our concepts around to better serve the community. And so the only way to get that feedback loop right is to go in the community. It's almost like beta testing a tech product. That's how I look at it. Most developers don't do that, but that's the feedback's really valuable for me. But in doing that, there's a political component where people there's a lot of stories about developers gentrifying neighborhoods or kicking out people, but everything that we touch, all the buildings we buy are always empty. They're usually old and vacant. They've been eyesores for a long time. And so we have a different approach to it. But it is very political. I'll say that much. And so, and literally, I mean, you're speaking to the politicians of LA at the same time. And so I guess the older I get, the more I realize the political side definitely runs in the veins.
What's your take on the SF debacle right now?
The which one?
San Francisco.
I used to live there, and so for me, we had a tech company and we had a tech office right in Soma, so right by Twitter, now X. And I just, from a human perspective, there was a problem where if you have employees and some of your employees have children, they're driving to work and they're seeing people shooting up. And everyone has this idea of like, oh, people shooting up drugs or whatever. But it's like it's like kids like people look like us we're shooting up. So a normal guy taking a break from their finance job or their tech job just shooting up. And so you start to see how it's affecting everybody, not just the people because in your head so many people go, oh, it's them, it's not me. But in San Francisco, I mean, it was every day that every time we went to lunch we would see various people shooting up. We'd see drugs be sold right in front of us, human feces everywhere. And so this is like 2015, 16, 17, and you just saw no end in sight. And then at some point VC money started coming in, and so there was like, you would see these tech kids at like a table giving cell phones out to the homeless people, and they were giving them phones so they could track them, um, which is like a tech concept. And now you think about that at a high level, and so what that means is there's really no money in the solution of this problem. There's only money in the sustainability of the problem. And so you have the government creating jobs around mental health, around clean needles, to give these drug addicts a way to survive, which is humane. But now you have VC money coming in to also try to, monetize the problem. And so once I saw that, I was like, this is something that's definitely not going away. Um, and it's just unfortunate. It's really just unfortunate. And I don't know how to solve the problem either, but it's happening now, and it feels like it's happening in LA. It's a little bit more isolated, but it certainly feels like it's getting worse.
Because it feels to me that most high level tech people wants to fix the problem through gentrification. So like acquiring these buildings literally and hoosting away these folks somewhere else,
Yeah.
some of them want to buy complexes and put them in there. Some
Yeah.
of them blame the high level administration, the mayors, it seems to be. And there's been Y Combinator that
Yeah.
has been taking the problem heads on recently. I'm bullish on them, but it seems, yeah, that it's tech people being like, yo, don't be in our way. So what you have to make up of this?
It's also, I mean, the other part of it too is because I remember being in San Francisco while this was happening, and we would call our landlord. And so if you're a tenant seeing this, you're calling your landlord. And then at some point this is before I was in real estate, but basically what I got to understand was the landlords would cut the trees so basically what happens is the homeless people generally like, or the unhoused generally like being in the shade. And so they started cutting their trees so that they would be in the sun. And then the landlords, I noticed, started suing the city. And so now it became like, if you're a landlord of one of these buildings, the city isn't doing anything, the sidewalk is public domain. Well, at the same time, you're devaluing property. And so there's all these open lawsuits in San Francisco where landlords are suing the city, because they are devaluing real property and real investment in that way. Oh man, I don't know. It's such a crazy problem. But there are, in LA now, there are houses being or buildings being acquired, and they're starting to house some of the unhoused, with mental health services. There's a lot of nonprofits sprouting up, and so we'll see. I've seen some success stories. I'm on the board of a group called Imagine LA. Our whole really purpose is to house or to avoid people falling into the poverty loop, which for some is really easy. It's as simple as like, you get a flat tire and you can't afford $100. Like, you can't do it. And that puts you in, you're missing rent. Now all of a sudden you're getting evicted. Now you're on the street, usually in a car first, and then ultimately, if that doesn't go well, um, you're living on the street in a tent. And so it's pretty easy. That's the other reality to it. It feels like there's a lot of Americans living right on the edge. And it's a much more common problem than I think any of us want to believe. And with the economic crisis happening now, and businesses investing much less because of the rates, it's challenge. It's going to be challenging, I think, for the next year or so.
Any use cases in the world that we can look up to? Is this something even that is removable? Isn't it like human nature that there will always be a lower 1% that weren't dealt the right cards?
I don't know that there's a successful use case, unfortunately. I think in my time working with Imagine LA, and I've seen the success stories. Unfortunately, what I've learned, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is it's the human being changing their mindset, and that's sometimes attributed to God. You know, sometimes they find religion, sometimes they have nothing else, where they just believe they have this belief that God will save them. And that small little thing is enough for them to wake up in the morning, try to find a job, have the belief they'll get the job. And so I think unfortunately, it's just a mindset shift that I've seen be the ultimate way out. But I don't, if we could scale that, we'd have a massive business.
Well, I think God has been on my side, certainly. So grateful for you, all powerful AGI God. Um, I've been dealt various good hands in my life so far,
Mm-hmm.
being a white male, having somewhat educated parents, an entrepreneurial dad, and some parents that never restrained my freedom, because I was pretty much always in trouble when I was younger. So I'm more and more realizing that, just like you're realizing your DNA or your ambition that comes from your parents, it slowly seeps in. And yes, God, whatever you call it, this higher force, this thing that is stronger than you, like if you don't have a God, you're pretty much of a megaloman. Um, you think you're just better than everything, like I do think though that yeah, God is the start, is like religion, right? And then once you can merge it, or let's call it spirituality, once you merge that with science, with like a clear plan and try to experiment and reproduce your experiments, then you can hit that scale. My problem is that people just think that life is about avoiding pain. A lot of people think that way. To
Mm-hmm.
me, it's actually facing pain head on and learning from that pain, welcoming pain, having a relationship with pain. I told you about the dog that they are returning to me today. That stresses my wife. That's just, we already have three, so um, plus the
Right.
wedding, plus the yada the yada. But it's growth, so it's like
Yeah.
impact, and it is trauma, but it's good trauma. It's like I grow muscles out of that. And
Yeah.
how do you adopt that mindset? Not sure if they teach that in the Bible for sure.
It's so hard. I mean, like I cold plunge every day, you know. It's like I do things. We were talking about tennis before. I play tennis, which for me is more of a mental exercise. Business is a mental exercise. I cold plunge every day because it's the hardest part of my day. It's me choosing pain. Obviously there's pleasure after, but being in that water, I mean, it's not like, oh, I love this. It's not a
I
hot
have a
tub.
tip for
Yeah.
you. I have a tip for you.
Yeah, yeah, go for
Two
it.
two of them actually. So when you plunge in the water,
Hmm.
imagine only one thing, and imagine that your body is cleaning. Well,
Mm.
actually, that was the second one. It's not the best one. The first is just imagine, tell your brain that you are super hot and this is refreshing.
Hmm.
Like on a very, very hot day playing tennis, and the
Yeah.
sun is like shining on you, and all you want is shade and air conditioning. Put your
Yeah.
brain in that mindset and then do the plunge, and then observe how your body doesn't inject that much adrenaline and cortisol in you. Anyway,
That's a
go
good
on. I cut
idea.
you off. Sorry.
No, it's funny you were going to say that because sometimes it is the case, right? So in LA, it's so hot out that jumping in the cold plunge is actually quite refreshing. The hard part was doing it this winter in LA when it was raining every day. And so it's like the temperature outside with the rain is almost the same as the cold plunge. And there's like you don't have an escape, you know. You get in the cold plunge, you're cold and wet. You get out of the cold plunge, you're cold and wet, and you're only going to be warm when you go inside.
Do you do
But
breath work as well when you plunge?
sometimes a
Okay.
little bit less than I'd like to.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
the
just go
meditated,
Wim Hof, like when you
yeah,
plunge, just go full Wim Hof.
yeah,
And
it's
after 5 minutes, as you know, it's like super enjoyable. It's like a meditation.
yeah.
At least I'm Canadian. That maybe that's like me, but who
No,
knows?
I love it. I love it now, and I we keep adjusting the temperature. We keep playing with new ideas, time, temperature, just to see what else we can do to form like stress in the body.
Right. And
But
in
no,
business, how do you do that? How do you put discomfort on yourself in business?
I think the problem I've had, I guess this is the gift and the curse, but the thing I've learned in business is you really only make it when you're sort of in over your skis, or you're going a little bit faster or uncontrollable than you would like it, right? And so unfortunately what that means is it has to be uncontrollable, or it has to be bigger than you, or it has to be a problem you've never solved before. Otherwise you're not growing. Otherwise the goal isn't big enough. And so I think for me, the unfortunate reality is we're just always trying to, like, in real estate, it was like, do one project first, find success, and then do the second one, right? It's like the same thing with like in tech, get your first client, create a beta, fix it, and then go to the market. And then you realize at some point, like, just get 100 clients and break the whole thing, and then you'll fix it because you'll have to, right? And so it's more of like forcing the brain to operate at a certain level is naturally going to be very uncomfortable, but unfortunately is the only thing to make you successful. And so
Right.
I think, yeah, I think it's like the cold plunge, right? It's like, if you want to feel great, unfortunately, your only option is to jump in there. And while you're in there, you can be miserable, or like you said, you can play around with it. You can play mental challenges, you can do
Hmm.
breathing exercises, but you have to get in there. That's the thing. You have to be uncomfortable.
Could we call that like the greatest hack? Isn't it the greatest gift, that adaptability? You
Yeah.
know, the fact, I forgot what it was called, not osmosis, um, but when you fast, your cells are eating themselves and they're cleaning themselves. There's a scientific term for that, but isn't that the greatest gift? I think people should understand that, whether it is through God, or, I mean, through God, they literally teach it through Jesus, right? Carrying the cross. And I think most
Right.
saints
They're
did
suffering.
suffer. Yeah, there was suffering to get
Yeah.
rewards. And that leads exactly to my next question. I see this Dom bottle behind you. My wedding is coming. I'm not too comfortable in celebrating anything nowadays. I have micro celebrations. Like
Mm-hmm.
today, I have these visions and I have these emotional moments, listening to good music and thinking about my life. I have at least one per day, or at least every 3 days, which is, I'm super grateful for that. But when first, I don't think alcohol can make me happy. It's gonna artificially make me happy for like 2 to 3 hours, and then the next day I will regret. I will have a down period. So how can I celebrate nowadays? Because my main model nowadays is just doing these podcasts, growing my brain, growing my network, my wallet.
Mm-hmm.
This always has a great return, and it can become very, very big, and I can reach pretty much all my goals. How or where should I include celebrations into this?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm also not good at this. And I wish I'm like trying to get better, but it's not that I'm trying to get better. I don't think I can trick myself into enjoying celebration. I think what I've learned is, like, sometimes being a good husband means enjoying yourself so that your wife or your partner can enjoy themselves. And
Are
so
you
it's
talking
almost,
about sex here?
I wish. I wish. But yeah, like my wife, she's like a social butterfly. She's a different creature. She likes to go out. She likes to,
Same wife I have here. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I've had to find a beauty in that, because I see the way people respond to her and her energy. And so sometimes if I don't want to go out or I don't want to celebrate, unfortunately, it diminishes her energy. And so I've learned, um, sometimes, right? Sometimes if I can work on just having a good time, it leads her to have a good time. And now we're at a higher vibration and higher energy. And that makes me happy, even though it's not the drinking that makes me happy or the being out late that makes me happy, but seeing her happy makes my life better.
Right. I fully understand you on that. Like, just this year, I started meeting people physically. First, I have an aversion to meeting strangers. Yeah, I'm weird, but if you're not like some kind of founder or have ambitions in life or a creative person I can learn something from,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like, that disqualifies pretty much 90 to 95% humans. I mean, I might make an effort to ask questions, but Yeah, I have an aversion to that. And the second thing, yeah, I'm obviously obsessed with my time, quite OCD about it, which is the point I want to talk about. And third, I think, for example, to me, shaking hands is not nice, like just spreading bacterias. And
Mm,
when we finish like at the family party and it's like time to give everyone the bye-bye, oh my God, I hate that.
mm,
I don't do it, and people think I'm weird. I am.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, I sort of struggle with that. So, but I guess the challenge here, and coming back to the wedding or any of these events, is to make an actual effort and prove your malleability, that you can
Yes.
adapt to these situations like a game, and I guess like somewhat limit alcohol intake and prioritize like emotional moments, I guess, and the connection. So that might be a game plan here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Unfortunately, that's the hack is because otherwise you'll just test a bunch of things that won't work. But yeah, that's the ultimate hack. And I've
And
had to learn that
experiment
too.
weird things in public. Like that would be my style, to say weird things and observe reactions just for my own database and stats.
That's
uh,
funny.
that type of guy. Yeah. Okay. I want to finish up with two quick questions. So the second one, I'm not going to tell you yet, but the first one is like, what are your goals for the rest of this year?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have two really big projects that we're working on right now. What's interesting about these projects is they're big name people that are involved with them, and so in some very real way, it's like I've gotten to a certain point in real estate where now I'm attracting a different level of partner, let's say, or someone who's willing to work with me, and because there's track record now. In that, there's an immense pressure, I would say, to not only knock it out of the well, to really to knock it out of the park, like to 10x, to 100x, to basically go, this is why I'm me, right? And so it's an opportunity to showcase my talents. And I think one, I take that very seriously, but the bummer of it, I think, is right now we're also entering the what I would call like there's like a cone of confusion that's happening and happens around one, what's happening with the federal interest rates, the economy as a whole, the narrative that people will see everywhere on social media and in on the news around how it's like the world is ending, and then you enter an election cycle where for sure people are going to be manipulated left and right. And so the challenge isn't so much the business side of it for me, but it's more of like, I need to prioritize just staying in my lane and not letting anything interfere with my North Star. And so it's really just about almost having blinders on to the noise, understanding people will be affected by the noise, but just staying true to my commitment to do this job. And so that's and I think we all have that challenge. It's hard, man. It's hard, but I think that's what I'm focused on for the rest of this year.
Especially in your case as an investor, I will say, like to me, I'm not too worried, quote unquote, about that. But good news, you've went through various of these crises where people were freaking the fuck out for nothing. 2008,
Mm-hmm.
2012, the end of the
Yeah.
world.
COVID.
Yeah, COVID, and then this uncertainty that with inflation and all that bullshit. Um,
Yeah.
you're good. You're gonna do well. And yeah, send me a screenshot of your first $1 billion check with the projects you're currently working on.
I
Okay, let's not
appreciate it.
exaggerate. Maybe like 50 mil or 100 mil. Um, last question. It's a deep one. It's a deathbed one. You're on your deathbed and you're looking back at your life. It's flashing in front of you. What will you have accomplished?
I think for me, this question is more about I think I will have hope that I've really probably just raised amazing children, that I've done right by my family. And I've inspired some people, hopefully a lot of people, to really make it safe to take the next step. I think that would be enough for me to go, yeah, I solved my problem, and hopefully I helped others solve theirs.
Good job. We need to do a round two about startups and why people should quit their job, which is a controversial one. but I think an innovatable one with AI. So talk about AI as well. And last but not least, talk about podcasting. So I'll book a second round. And until then, where can people find out more about you?
You can go to our podcast page. It's called Startup to Storefront. It's everywhere. Apple, YouTube, Spotify, you name it. Go on YouTube. That's probably the best because we do a lot of video. And then on Instagram, I'm at Diego Torres _ Palma. And yeah, find me, Diego Torres Palma, LinkedIn, whatever you want.
There you go.